I am a 20-year-old male. When I was 11, I was abducted by aliens. Let me walk you through the story. One night, in March of 2014, I was laying in bed. I shared a room with my two siblings, 9 and 6. It was dark, no lights were outside. I was already paranoid. I had a feeling I was being watched. Suddenly, a flash of really bright light came through the window. On the wall, I had a picture frame. I swore I could see something large in the reflection, possibly a spacecraft of some sort. There was no noise. I ran out of the room, startled and screaming for my parents. They were watching TV downstairs and heard the commotion. My dad ran upstairs and asked what was wrong. I told him that I saw a bright light outside the window and that I didn't want to go back to bed. My parents let me stay downstairs and watch TV with them for an hour or so. Then it was time for everyone to sleep. My mom offered to sleep on the couch so I could sleep in the bed with my dad because I was still so terrified. I agreed. So I went to bed in my parents' room with my dad beside me. I tried to convince my dad to keep a light on, but he said that I would be fine and that if I want to sleep in his room, I have to sleep with the light off, so I complied. My dad has sleep apnea, so he has to use a machine to sleep comfortably. He snores really loud, and the mask he had to wear for his sleep apnea created so much white noise that he could barely hear anything else. After he puts on his mask and we say our good nights, we fall asleep. At around what I would say is 3 a.m. I don't know for sure, I just know it was around then. I woke up to the sound of whispering. It wasn't English, it almost sounded like gibberish, some foreign language. My heart sunk. I slowly opened my eyes, so scared of what I was going to see. There were 3 tall, skinny, gray creatures with big black oval-shaped eyes. 2 were at the foot of the bed while the other was to my bedside. I was on the left side of the bed. Everything was so vivid, it was 100% my parents' bedroom. They all stared at me. I could barely move, but I still managed to pull up the bed sheet above my eyes. In an act of desperation, I tried to utter to my dad. "Dad. Dad." I said. But he couldn't hear me over the sound of his sleep apnea machine as well as his loud snoring. Then everything went black. The next morning, I remember being in slight pain. My stomach hurt, but I didn't think much of it. In fact, I barely remembered the night before. I ruled the entire experience the night before as a possible nightmare, but I still felt so weird about the whole thing. As the months went by, I started getting more and more interested in aliens. I wanted to know more about them because of this nightmare I had. But every night, I wouldn't be able to fall asleep. I was so scared, perhaps reading about them wasn't the best idea either, that I would keep every light on in my room and stare at my window until I couldn't bear to stay awake. Then I started having nightmares. Nightmares about these tall gray beings with big oval-shaped eyes. Nothing much happened in the dreams except for being able to see them. After a few of these dreams, I started to feel that something may have been happening to me, almost like the first nightmare I had wasn't a nightmare at all. I tried telling my mom about my experience, but she told me it sounded like a sleep paralysis nightmare. Throughout the months after my experience, I also started having severe stomach problems and panic attacks, but my mom thought it was just anxiety. She ended up scheduling me with a therapist, more like a counselor, but was trained in anxiety and EMDR. Throughout my visits with her, I told her that I had a nightmare that felt more real than like a dream. The one I said earlier in the post. Every single time I saw her, I mentioned it to her, until one day she decided she was going to try something. In order for me to get past it, she thought it would be a good idea to try EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, on me. My mom stayed in the lobby, and the therapist and I went into her office. She sat me down and started to wave her fingers in the air, trying to get me to follow them. Then I started to enter a trance-like state. She asked me to walk her through the nightmare, so I did. I told her about the figures surrounding the bed, whispering in gibberish. And then she told me to keep going. I started to recount things I couldn't remember beforehand. After I pulled up the sheets to cover my eyes and after I tried to get my dad's attention, one of the beings grabbed the sheet and pulled it off of me gently. I was frozen. It picked me up. The being was cold to the touch. I was in my underwear, and I distinctly remember that the being had long fingers, either 3 or 4 of them on both hands. The three beings, me included, headed for the window in my parents' room. The window was already open and the curtain was blowing in the wind. We all leapt out of the window. I'm still in the being's arms. Window is on the second story, onto the grass below. We were in my backyard. We didn't have a fence and had a forest behind our house. The beings ran into the forest. I remember the sound of the grass. It was wet and was sloshing. I remember seeing the being's feet sloshing on the ground. It was so cold. As we ran through the forest, I saw light reflecting off the trees. We ended up getting to a huge metallic spaceship. It had a strip of windows in the middle of it. It kind of looked like an Oreo. There was a walkway into the ship and the three beings walked up it with me in their possession. They brought me into a room where I was surrounded by bright lights. They set me on a metal table which was extremely cold on my skin. They strapped me in on the legs, arms, and head with metal bands. Then the three that brought me left. A new figure walked in. It was the same species, but it was carrying a tool. It looked kind of like a pizza cutter, but jagged and warped. I remember begging the creature that whatever it did, I didn't want them to hurt me. It didn't say anything. Instead, it turned on the pizza cutter-shaped device, which started spinning rapidly. It brought it to my stomach. I remember feeling vibrating, but I can't remember if there was any pain. I tried not to look, but my curiosity got the best of me. I peered down and saw what looked to be some intestines get removed from my stomach. Then I started to panic. I screamed at the top of my lungs for the beings to stop and let me go. At this point during EMDR, I was hyperventilating. I had not known that any of this was in my memory and I panicked. Before we could finish up, I jumped up out of my chair screaming and ran out into the lobby where my mom was waiting for me. I kept saying over and over, "They cut me open, God, they cut me open." Then after I calmed down, my mom lifted my shirt up to prove everything was fine. But in fact, there was a huge mark. It looked like a small surgery scar on the side of my stomach. I panicked more and was crying profusely. My therapist didn't believe anything I had said and tried insinuating to my mother that I was schizophrenic. I can assure you, I am not. We never went back to her again. After all of this, I tried to sit with it. I was tormented for years about this experience. I would have nightmares, not be able to sleep. Hell, I even contemplated on if I was lying to myself. But now, at the age of 20, I am not that scared anymore. If anything, I am rather interested. Don't get me wrong, anytime I think about it, a chill goes down my spine. But now I want to dig deeper. And more importantly, I want to connect with others who have a similar experience. I want to heal, and I really don't know where to look. I also am in need of validation, for that experience was life-changing and really did a number on me, lol. What should I do now?